What are the best rank 1 occult spells in Pathfinder 2nd edition? Which ones are they? And do you need to be part of Occult to use them? Unbelievable. This is the Dominomicon, authored and hosted by me, Dominic. The Dominomicon is dedicated to all nerdy things, with my current obsession being the TTRPG Pathfinder 2nd edition. In this video chapter, I'm continuing my top 20 spells series, this time going over rank 1 occult spells. I've already done Arcane and Divine, and this time we're going to dive into the weird and esoteric. I really like the occult spell list, probably more so than Divine and Arcane, and hopefully I'll be able to explain to you why with this video chapter. If you find this video chapter helpful and or enjoyable, please give it a like and consider subscribing, joining as a member, or taking a look at my Patreon. And now let's magic up some weird tentacles to switch on the music. Okay, so this top 20 list is going to follow the same rules as the last two. Watching those videos would probably help you out there, but I'm not your mum, so I'm not going to tell you to do that. I'll just stick with the passive-aggressive suggestions. That means no mythic spells. All spells from all books are considered in no particular order. Runners-up will be listed at the end. I'll be including all rarities, and I'll try to type each spell: damage, support, control, debuff, and utility. Some spells will have multiple types, and I'll mostly be looking at spells that are good for the current rank. It's not going to be all damage spells, and heightening will be considered, but not a main reason for me to pick a spell. This list may include spells that haven't been remastered yet, so might have traits that look odd, but they're still perfectly valid choices for PCs. There is going to be an unfortunate crossover with other spell lists, as I've been going through the Arcane and Divine ones already. I'll still be having those particular crossover spells in this list because they're just too good not to have in here, but I'll try to mostly skip over them as I've already talked about them. To quickly explain the occult tradition, it mostly focuses on damage over time, debuffs, control, with a few support and utility thrown in there for good measure. I'd say it's probably not as good as Arcane or Primal for pure damage, at least from my experience, but the damage over times are really good, as are the debuffs, and it's always nice to have some heal spells in a tradition too, which is probably why I like this spell list so much. Okay, let's get started. I like healing spells, so this is a no-brainer to have on my list. Soothe is a 2-action spell with a concentrate, emotion, healing, manipulate, and mental traits. It targets one willing creature within 30 feet, healing for 1d10 plus 4 HP, and gives a +2 status bonus to mental effects for a 1-minute duration. So this spell is good, but it's not quite as good as heals. It doesn't heal you for as much on average, aside from one important distinction: you can heal both living and dead creatures with it. So this is a good spell for healing undead allies or summons, etc., especially in a campaign that has living creatures too, and that bonus to mental effects is also nice. So yeah, it's a decent healing spell to have on your list, and it heightens pretty well too, basically doubling every spell rank. Nice and simple. I like a good healing spell, and Soothe is exactly that. Moving on. This spell is indeed grim. Grim Tendrils is a 2-action spell with a concentrate, manipulate, and void traits. It has a 30-foot line and targets fortitude. On a fail, it deals 2d4 void damage, which is kinda meh, but also deals 1 persistent bleed damage too, with the whole thing being doubled on a crit fail. On a success, they take half the void damage and no bleed, with the crit success doing nothing. Of course, the reason I like this spell is, first of all, it sounds super creepy. Tendrils of Darkness sounds like a heavy metal band, although I know nothing about heavy metal, so maybe I'm wrong there. But the main reason I like it is because a 30-foot line is pretty great at such a low level. That's quite a lot of enemies you could hit at once, and that persistent bleed damage is nothing to laugh at. Occult is good at these types of damage, and I think Grim Tendrils is a good example of this. Oh, and it doubles its damage every spell rank. Awesome. Next up, let's get this one out of the way. I've mentioned it twice before, and I'll be mentioning it again when I do Primal. Honestly, I'm not even going to go over this one. Just get it if it's on your spell list because it's busted. Next. Who doesn't like to push people off things, especially in real life? And yes, that is a joke. Do not push people off things in real life. Having to state that that is actually a joke terrifies me about the future of mankind. Kinetic Ram is a 1 to 3 action spell with the Evocation, which is a legacy trait, and Force traits that can push 10 feet on a failed fort save or double on a crit fail. For the 1-action version, it targets one creature within 15 feet. For 2 actions, it's within 30 feet, and the range is doubled by default. And on a crit fail, they're knocked prone, and they take 1d6 bludgeoning damage. And the 3-action one that targets all creatures in a 5-foot emanation. This spell is certainly situational, but getting to push creatures away from you could be potentially really useful. Pushing off cliffs, pushing into hazards, pushing away from yourself, or even pushing into an ally so they don't have to move on their turn. Lots of good ways to get some use out of this spell, and getting to push away multiple enemies for 3 actions is pretty solid too. I always like spells that have multiple action costs to do different things, so Kinetic Ram was always destined to be on this list. Moving onwards. I'm joking, this one's kinda meh. I mentioned this spell on my arcane list, and that's because it's a really great spell. Dizzying Colors is a 2-action spell with a concentrate, illusion, incapacitation, manipulate, and visual traits. It's a 15-foot cone and targets will. It lasts for 1 or more rounds depending on enemy saves. On a crit success, nothing happens. On a success, they're dazzled for 1 round. On a fail, they're stunned 1, blinded for 1 round, and dazzled for 1 minute. And on a crit fail, they're blinded for a whole minute rather than a round. It's a great debuff spell. Cones are usually pretty good if they use them in the right situation, and the conditions this applies are just really good, especially on a fail. This one is definitely worth your time. Next spell. This spell is really annoying. That was a terrible joke, by the way. The spell's fine. Agitate targets 1 creature within 30 feet with a will save and has the concentrate, manipulate, mental, and non-lethal traits. On a fail, it lasts 2 rounds, doubled on a crit fail. On a success, it's 1 round and has no effect on a crit success. If the target doesn't stride, fly, or swim at least once each turn, it'll take 2d8 mental damage. So yeah, if they move, I guess it's not going to be an issue, but if they're in position and don't want to move, they're taking damage, and if they do move, they might as well be losing multiple actions as they may have to move back. And they might be triggering reactive strikes with this movement as it isn't forced movement. And it doubles its damage at every spell rank, making it really good to heighten. A fun little spell that can restrict actions or force damage, and it's non-lethal too if needed. Lovely stuff. Next occult spell. This is another one of those really cool spells I already mentioned in my Arcane Spells video. Short Strike is a 1-action spell with a Concentrate and Fortune traits that targets yourself, and on the next attack roll, you roll twice and take the higher result. This works for both strikes and spell attack rolls, so it could be quite useful indeed. The biggest downside is the 10-minute cooldown Paizo added for some reason somewhat recently, but otherwise it's a great spell and it's worth taking if you're doing any sort of attack rolls. Let's keep occulting. How to kill with words aside from writing a nasty YouTube comment. Biting Words is a 2-action spell with the attack, auditory, evocation, linguistic, and sonic traits. Once you finish casting this spell, you can target someone within 30 feet and do a ranged attack roll, dealing 2d6 sonic damage or double on a crit. And this spell lasts a minute, allowing you to do 2 or more attacks that cost a single action each for the same effects, then the spell ends. Sonic damage is rarely resisted in PF2E, and getting to do this 3 times makes this spell pretty strong. I always like spells that let you do them multiple times, and as you don't need to immediately use this twice more and it lasts a whole minute, it gives you a decent chunk of time to actually be able to use it. And it doubles in damage every spell rank, which is always lovely to see. So yeah, a good direct damage spell, kind of cool for occult and thematic indeed. Insert next spell transition words here. This one was also in my Divine Spells video. Beseech the Sphinx is a 2-action spell with a rare Concentrate and Manipulate traits with a range of 30 feet, and you can target a creature other than yourself, and it lasts for 10 minutes. You choose a skill and a saving throw, and the target gains +1 to those, and as I mentioned in my previous spells video, this is particularly good when heightened, though the normal version is pretty good anyway. As I've already been over this one, let's roll on to the next. This one makes me think of gears made of metal for some reason. Phantom Pain has the Concentrate, Illusion, Manipulate, Mental, and Non-Lethal traits. I'm not deliberately choosing non-lethal spells, this list just seems to have a few. The spell has a range of 30 feet, targets 1 creature with a will save, and it deals 2d4 mental damage and a persistent 1d4 mental damage on a failed save, and it makes the enemy sickened 1, and this is for a whole minute unless they happen to recover from that sickened effect. On a success, it just deals the initial damage and not the persistent damage, and nothing happens on a crit success, and on a crit fail, it makes them sickened 2. Persistent damage is always good, especially when it's 1d4, and it's mental damage on top of that, which can be particularly good too. But that sickened effect is nothing to snub your nose at. Sickened is an amazing debuff, effectively lowering all of their stats by its value, so them losing 1 to all their stats just for failing a save for a whole minute is very strong, and it heightens well too, doubling its damage every spell rank. Great spell, and is definitely very occult-ish. What else we got for occultish spells? This one is certainly occultish, but it's also arcane-ish, as I've already mentioned it before. I'll cover it briefly, as I've already spoken about it before. Draw Ire is a 2-action spell that targets 1 creature within 120 feet and targets will saves that lasts for a minute, deals 1d10 mental damage, and makes them have a -1 status penalty to attack rolls against creatures other than yourself. It's a good little debuff and a tiny damaging spell that's gonna screw up, potentially, an enemy's turn, as they may need to target you instead, and if you're far enough away, as you have 120 feet, remember, then maybe they'll spend all their actions trying to close that gap on you. The fact that it lasts a minute is pretty awesome. Good little spell. Speaking of awesome little spells, Enfeeble is another one of those spells that I've mentioned twice before, so I'm not going to go over it all that much. Suffice to say, it's a very strong debuff spell that makes enemies weaker if they're strength-based. Absolutely worth your time. Next spellbook, please. I mentioned summon spells with my arcane spells video and my divine one as well. That's because I think they're worth mentioning, and the occult summoning spells are worth mentioning too. Summon Fae, in particular when heightened up to 4th, will allow you to summon a unicorn, and a unicorn has the heal spell, meaning that they can heal you or your allies twice, which is pretty good, especially considering the second round when you sustain this, which is just one action. Being able to cast a heal spell for one action is pretty awesome, especially when it's the 2-action version. I do think summon spells can be really good, and I'll basically always be mentioning them in my top spells list. They don't have a saving throw, they can body block, they can flank with you and your allies, and they sometimes have little abilities and can even waste enemy actions getting hit and killed. I just think they're worth having as long as you utilize them well, totally worth your time. But let's keep going. This is one of those spells that is a lot better heightened, but it's still pretty useful even when not heightened. Sleep is a 2-action spell with a concentrate, incapacitation, manipulate, mental, and sleep trait, unsurprisingly. It has a range of 30 feet and a 5-foot burst that targets will. On a success, they just take a -1 status penalty on the perception checks for 1 round, which is effectively worthless. On a fail, though, they fall unconscious. Now, they do not fall prone or release what they're holding when you cast this spell on them, and following the unconscious rules, they're probably going to wake up on their turn. However, they're still going to be unconscious, and while unconscious, they take a -4 status penalty to their AC as well as their perception and reflex saves. And they're off guard on top of that, which is an effective -6 to their AC, which is very powerful indeed. Now, as they're going to wake up on their turn, your best bet is to try and cast this on enemies just after they finish their turn so your party can capitalize on it. But a 5-foot burst is pretty good. If they fail and take a -6 to their AC, that's just incredibly strong. And as I said, when you heighten it, it gets a little bit stronger, and they do actually stay unconscious for a whole minute, and they fall prone and release what they're holding, etc., which is really cool. It does have the incapacitation trait though, so keep an eye out for that one. Right, next pick on our list is... Command is another one of those spells that's shown up multiple times before, so I'll mostly skip over it. Suffice to say, getting an enemy to lose an action on their turn can be very strong, especially if you tell them to run away, because they'll probably have to spend another action coming back to you. Command is just a great spell overall when used correctly. Coming in hot and weird. I couldn't have a best occult spell list and not include a curse. Curse of Recoil is a reaction with a concentrate and curse trait to an enemy within 120 feet, and it's a will save. This happens when an enemy is about to make a ranged attack. If they succeed at the save, they become off guard until the beginning of their next turn. If they fail, they take a -1 to that ranged attack, and it renders them off guard until the beginning of their next turn. On a crit fail, it's -2 and lasts for the whole turn. This one is not phenomenally powerful, but being able to just kind of click your fingers as a reaction and make an enemy off guard until the start of their next turn could be potentially useful to your allies. And bear in mind that -1 to that range attack could actually turn an attack into a miss, or maybe even a crit into a normal hit. And I just love the fact that it's a reaction. I love spell slots that are reactions because most spellcasters don't really get any good reactions, and here's a way to actually get some use out of them. Next contender. Force Barrage is always going to be mentioned on every spell list it appears on, which is why it appeared on my arcane spell list as well. As I've already mentioned it, I'll just go over this briefly, but it effectively allows you to choose how many actions to cast it with. There's a 120-foot range, targets one creature, and deals 1d4 plus 1 force damage for each action you spend on it. What I like about it is it's just basically guaranteed damage. If you need to finish off an enemy, this is the way to do it without having to worry, especially if it's about to be the enemy's turn. And it heightens pretty good too. Every 2 ranks you can find additional shard with each action you spend. It's a great spell, and I recommend it to basically everyone. Time for the next entry. I mentioned Bane and Bless in my Divine spell list, but that's because they're really great spells to have. Again, I'll just briefly go over these. They create a smallish emanation that lasts for a minute, and allies inside the emanation gain +1 status bonus to attack rolls, and Bane does the opposite for enemies with a will save. I think Courageous Anthem's a little bit better than Bless because it just costs 1 action, though you do have to keep sustaining it. For this one, you don't have to sustain, and when you do sustain it, the range gets a little bit bigger. They're great support spells to have if you don't have a bard knocking around, and there's nothing wrong with giving enemies a -1 to their attack rolls. That's always good fun. Getting close to the end now. What have we got next? This is the spell with a funny name. It's a 2-action spell with a Concentrate, Emotion, Manipulate, and Mental traits that targets one creature with a will save with a range of 30 feet and lasts for 1 round. On a fail, the enemy is Clumsy 2 and Stupefied 2. On a success, that's just 1 for each of these conditions. On a crit fail, Clumsy 3, Stupefied 3, and Confused, and it does not have the Incapacitation trait. This is a very, very good debuff spell that I do not see many spellcasters taking, and I don't know why. Clumsy 2 is just solid all round because it reduces their AC, which is always nice, and of course, if they're a spellcaster, Stupefied is excellent as well. It's a great debuff spell, and that's why I mentioned it on my arcane spell list as well. Last but not least, yet another spell mentioned in my Divine List video. Sanctuary is a 2-action spell with a Concentrate and Manipulate traits that has a range of touch, targets one creature, and lasts for a minute. You cast this on an ally, and each time a creature wants to attack your ally, they have to make a will save, and if they fail, they cannot target your ally, they lose the action, and cannot attack them anymore on this turn, which could potentially ruin their entire turn. On a crit fail, they cannot target them ever, basically, as long as the spell lasts. On a success, nothing happens. On a crit success, the spell ends. Biggest downside, as I mentioned in my Divine Spell List video, is that if your ally takes a hostile action, then the spell immediately ends. So you want to put this on healers or support characters, etc., and then when the enemies target them, they're going to lose actions potentially, which is nice. I guess you could put it on like your fighter or whatever and just send them into the middle of enemies, and they're going to end up like losing quite a lot of their actions potentially. Sanctuary is a good support spell with a little bit of debuff potential in there because it kind of messes up enemy turns. And that's the lot, but let's dive into my runners-up. Charm is nice because it's always nice to charm people into doing what you want them to do. Deja Vu is really interesting. It's just incredibly specific and niche and how you use it. I do like Endure because temporary HP is never a bad thing and it heightens pretty good as well. Equal Footing is an interesting one. It's just that the requirements are a little bit hard, I find. Needing to have a creature that has a greater land speed than yours kind of requires a recall knowledge check and that sort of thing. Friend Fetch is potentially interesting as you grab a few of your allies and bring them to you. Could be useful. You have to be very specific scenarios, but could indeed be useful. Gravitational Pull has some uses as well because there's no size requirements. You could potentially pull massive creatures and gargantuan creatures towards you or your allies or whatever. Helpful Steps can be good out of combat if you need to get someone a little bit higher. Illusory Object is good for disguising things and maybe hiding behind them. I've mentioned the Mystic Armor, Runic Weapon, etc. spells before. They're good and they allow you to gain access to like striking and +1 potency runes like before you're meant to be able to purchase them, which can be cool. Phantasmal Minion can be fun. I actually don't know all that much about Phantasmal Minion. I think there's a bunch of use cases that could make it really strong. I just don't know what they are yet. None of my players have ever used them. Please let me know in the comments if you know when this is really useful. Signal Skyrocket is just fun, and I have to include it because it's fun. I thought Lose the Path could be really good, but it's a reaction, and the problem is it says it only works on a stride. So rather than all of their strides, so if they have to spend 3 actions moving towards you and you do this reaction, it's only going to be 1 of their strides, as far as I can tell anyway. So it just like halves their movement for 1 of their strides, which is, it's fine, it's decent. It's a reaction, I guess. It's not bad. Losing an action for a reaction, I guess, is all right. Then there's Scorching Blast and Aqueous Blast. I just don't like that they have multiple tap penalty restrictions. Overselling Flourish is pretty good. I just don't like that it only lasts until the start of your turn. So if you do this outside of your turn and is a reaction, then it's basically not going to last all that long. I actually think that Curse of Recoil is slightly better, although the -1's not as good as Dazzled, but still. And I do like Ink Shots because Dazzled is always fun. That's quite a lot of runners-up this time. And that's going to be my list of top 20 rank 1 occult spells and my runners-up. I will get around to finishing off my rank 1 spells with Primal, hopefully in the next few weeks, we shall see, and then I will have gone over my top 20 cantrips and all of the rank 1 spell traditions, not including Elementalists. I think that one kind of sucks, quite frankly. If you think I missed some of your favorite occult spells, please let me know in the comments and I'll try my best to get back to each and every one of you. Thanks very much for watching. If you found this video chapter helpful and or enjoyable, please give it a like and consider subscribing, joining as a member, and taking a look at my Patreon, especially if you want to have your name at the end of this video, like the following: Max Magnus 20019, Ozzy Smith, Sirakia, Nikola Milenkovic, Kyle Travis, and patrons and archivists Clash and Q. Thanks again, guys, for all your support. It means a lot to me. But for now, this is Dominic of the Dominic wishing you a fond farewell, and until next time, goodbye.